I'm a writer. I love saying that. I've been writing novels for about 20 years now, and I can tell you one thing no writer ever forgets is publication day for their first novel. Mine was a legal thriller. It was 1994. I'd been practicing law for 12 years, so of course it was a legal thriller. And as I'd run into people in the courthouse or in the office, they were very happy for me. The conversation might go something like this. Jim, wow, saw the book in the bookstores. Fantastic, congratulations. How's it doing? I'd tell them, great, probably the most exciting thing that ever happened to me. And then there would be that question they all wanted to ask, which was, well, are you going to continue to practice law? Well, yeah, I'd tell them, I'm a lawyer. It's what I do. Then I'd get that look, that kind of knowing look. And the response would be something along the lines of, gee, I'm really sorry. I hope your next book does better. and I would have to step back and say, no, you don't understand. I didn't write a novel because I hated practicing law. I write because I love to write. I wrote my first novel when I was 11 years old and used to put my friends into the book as characters so that they'd listen to me read it to them. They weren't buying it. Truth is, I have always loved to write, but being a writer at least, was never a goal for me. It was more of a dream, and I didn't really have a blueprint on how to achieve that dream at all. But I was very happy going back in time to the late 80s when I noticed this trend. And the trend was books written by lawyers about lawyers seemed to be creeping onto the bestseller list. And the hottest television show in the country was a drama called L.A. Law. And either arrogantly or naively, I decided, I can do that. And so I did. Labor Day weekend, 1988, I decided I'm going to write a novel. And I made one rule for myself, and that is keep it fun. I did not want this to be a second job. But soon my life became pretty much this. I would get up early in the morning, I would go into work, 7, 8 o'clock, stay till 8, 8:30 at night, have dinner with my friends, then start writing about 10 o'clock. And I would write till midnight, 1 o'clock. And I kept this up for about 2 years, and if you've kind of picked up on the fact that I am violating rule number 1 for myself. It was really not that much fun. But I was driven at this point and determined to finish. And of course, then you reach the point that every writer reaches. It's the moment of truth. You've actually got to let somebody else read the thing. I let my closest friends read my script, which is kind of like asking your mother if she thinks you're handsome. But you have got to start somewhere. They loved it. I was so energized by their reaction. They said, you have got to get this thing published. But I was a little lost at that point because I had no idea how to get a book published. But I learned quickly you needed a literary agent. So I sent off my manuscript to the top agents. I sent it to Robert Ludlum's agent. There was this new guy named Grisham. So I sent it to his agent. And they sent it back to me about as quickly as I sent it off. Not a total negative feedback, but the message was, you've got some storytelling ability, but your first novel should be no more than 90,000, maybe 100,000 words. So I went back to my computer, ran the word count function. I discovered that my novel was 265,000 words long. Every tidbit of conversation that I had picked up in a cocktail party had found its way into the dialogue. I had 5 or 6 lead characters. I had 3 or 4 plots. And I thought, oh, well, trilogy. We'll just break this thing up, right? Kind of silly, but I was down by the fact that I'm not going to get published because I've actually worked too hard and put too much into this. Then I got a call from a guy named Artie. Artie Pine, I call him Artie the Optimist to this day. Most positive person. His favorite expression was onward and upward, and that's the way he lived his life. Artie says, your script needs a shave and a haircut. Couldn't argue with that. I didn't tell him that Ludlam's agent had already declared the thing terminally obese, but I'll roll with it, okay? He says, look, if you will agree to cut this down to a marketable length, I'll represent you. And I took that deal. I thought, the guy already had gotten his start representing George Burns, so I figured anybody who represented God had to be honest, right? So this sounded great. And I spent another year and a half, editing, cutting, revising, rewriting. June 92. I'm ready to go. I send it to Artie. He's excited, I can tell. He's going out with it. I'm thinking, this is going to happen. I am going to get published. Well, the rejections start to trickle in. By July, it's a flood. Artie the optimist, of course, is like, don't worry. They can't all publish your book. It only takes one. Then comes August of 92. August of 92, we had a visitor in South Florida by the name of Andrew. And until Hurricane Katrina came along, Hurricane Andrew was the worst storm ever to hit this country. I had just started dating a woman who would eventually become my wife. We didn't know each other all that well at that time, but her house was destroyed. Her grandmother's house was destroyed. Her parents' house was destroyed, and they were all living with me in a 2-bedroom townhouse with no air conditioning. And that is right about the time I got the last rejection letter from Artie, along with the message. It essentially said, Jim, I am sorry. I have knocked on every door in New York City, and nobody wants your book. So I crumple up the rejection letter, pitch it in the 8-foot-high pile of hurricane debris that was once my parking spot, and figure I took a shot. 2 weeks later, phone rings. It's Artie the optimist. And Artie says, Jim, I've been thinking about this. You got the most encouraging rejection letters I have ever seen. And I laughed, but the guy had a point, and his point was, you took something that was broken, this 265,000 word monster in a box, and tried to fix it. Start over. Page 1, chapter 1. You can do it. And as I hung up the phone, I thought, yeah, you're right, Artie, I can do this. But it didn't take long for me to sort of lose this enthusiasm and start to think, I'm really not in such a good place. And it was those feelings I've always had about Square One, which is it has this negative vibe associated with it, right? I mean, nobody ever moves forward to Square One. It's always back to Square One. And not just back, it's back to the beginning. And those negative feelings start with childhood, our first experiences, right? We've all played the board games. We roll the dice, we move our marker, and we land on the spot. Wrong spot, back to Square One. Hopscotch, right? Lose your balance, step on a line, back to Square One. And it continues on into adulthood. We go to Square One because we're pushed there. Something negative in our life, some adversity. There's an external force we can't control. Bottom line, something bad has happened. Sometimes something really bad. I can remember my mother telling me the story of her college chemistry professor who told her that only over his dead body was she going to medical school because she would be taking up a man's spot. I think of my brother-in-law, suddenly a single parent, raising 3 children because my sister's car skidded off the road in a rainstorm. We don't want to be there. Our gut reaction might be summed up in this conversation. See if there's any Trekkie fans out there, okay? Scotty, come on. If it's not too much trouble, could you just beam me back down? I was totally good where I was. Right. Well, totally good where I was. Let's think of something totally different, though. I'm talking about Square One by choice. Self-imposed square one. It's a choice. It's a tough choice. It's a little bit like breaking up with someone you love, only a lot harder. Because, when you break up with someone or end a relationship, you can at least rationalize it. You can say, oh, well, I'm no good for her. She'll meet Mr. Right. They'll build a castle in Andalusia and send their kids off to, back to Fancy Pants University, and everything will be just fine, right? They'll live happily ever after. Well, that's not the situation when you've taken this manuscript that you've been working on for 4 years and you shove it in a drawer and walk away from it, right? You are the judge, jury, and executioner of that idea. And you may even hear it calling from you, from the grave. Jim, buddy, those were good times we had, remember? Come on, let me out of here. But you just walk away. Self-imposed square one means scrapping an idea, completely scrapping an idea, your idea, and not necessarily a bad idea, for nothing but the creative freedom to start over. Well, and that's where I was in August of '92. I got to start over. Well, problem was, I was 4 years into this process, and I had nothing to show for it except some really bad first lines. Where am I going to go with this? Where am I going to go? And it just was one of those situations where I was frozen because I didn't want to start down this 4-year road to nowhere again. I needed to make that start count. But it wasn't coming at all. I was in a situation where staring at this computer screen, going to work during the days, coming home at night, and that same computer screen was staring back at me the next day. I was getting nowhere. I had writer's block. Now, I did that for about 2 months until October of '92. I decided to go for a walk. I got about 2 blocks from my house. Police car pulls up onto the grassy part of the swale, startles me. Cop jumps out of the car. He demands to know, where are you going? And I'm startled. I think, well, I'm just out for a walk. I live around here. He says, well, do you have any identification? And I'm thinking, I'm a lawyer, Constitution, civil rights, free country, all that stuff, but I got to go to work in 6 hours. So I'm like, well, I'm very polite. And I told him, well, truthfully, no, I don't. And I didn't. I was just in jogging shorts and a T-shirt. And he says, well, wait right here. There's been a report of a peeping Tom in the neighborhood. So I'm like, oh, great. I got to go to work pretty soon. What am I going to do? But I'm listening to the dispatcher describe the peeping Tom that they're looking for, and she says, they're looking for a white male, under 6 feet tall, brown hair, brown eyes, wearing a white T-shirt. I was wearing a white T-shirt. Wearing dark blue shorts. I was wearing dark blue shorts, and I'm thinking, I'm going to jail. Finally, she adds, and a mustache. And the cop looks at me like, could he have had a phony mustache? And he ripped it off. Someone in the shadows thought he had a mustache. We stared at each other, and finally he just says, go home. And I'm shaking, though, even as I'm watching that squad car pull away. I'm thinking, but for a mustache, there I go. And I would have to make a phone call from the jail to one of the partners at my law firm and explain to them, yeah, well, the charge, peeping Tom. they'd have no sense of humor about that. And of course it would be on the news, it would be picked up. The peeping Tom lawyer, that's who I would have been forever. Because when you see that guy on the news who, being stuffed in the back of the squad car, is your first reaction, oh, hey, look, honey, there goes another innocent man off to jail. Your reaction is he did it, or if he didn't do it this time, he's probably done a lot of other things in his life, right? Your last thought is this is a completely innocent man, and it's a case of mistaken identity, and he'll be vindicated. Your mind doesn't even go there. So I decided I'll write about this. Knew real quickly that Peeping Tom Lawyer was not going to be a bestseller, but I took the feeling of being innocent and being accused, and ran with it. I did what a thriller writer does, and I took it to the most dramatic extreme I could think of and wrote a scene of a man on death row, hours away from execution, for a crime he may not have committed. And I wrote that novel in 7 months, and Artie sold it in a weekend, and the rest, they say, is history. But what did I learn? Well, it pays to shave. Number one, I suppose. But apart from that, I guess I learned, square one, it certainly is liberating. Self-imposed square one is pretty rare, takes courage. But I also learned, I think, that there's value in rabbit holes. I think of that 4-year ordeal of writing that novel as kind of my degree in creative writing, which kind of raises the question, could I have avoided 4 years of agony and wasted time by having the courage to embrace self-imposed square one? I don't know. That's a real trade-off. And I can tell you that when I felt myself there in September of '92, I wasn't just standing on square one, I was trapped inside of it. And the demon standing out there was writer's block. But all of that said, I don't think there is such a thing as going back to square one for a writer, because you can never go back exactly to the place you were. You can never be the person you used to be. There's a movie, very famous movie. You've all seen it, okay? The house falls from the sky, lands on the witch. Dorothy steps out. We go from color to black and white. Dorothy says that famous line, Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Great line, but I think they put it in the wrong place. I think it should have been in the last scene. You all know that one too, where we're back in black and white, and the family is standing around Dorothy. She's got the cold compress on her head. Says another line, home. There's no place like home. A little corny, but it's a great line too. But it was a missed opportunity, in my opinion. Missed opportunity because in that scene, it shouldn't have been black and white. They should have gone black and white, color, to vivid 3D. And Dorothy should have looked around the room at all those people, the neighbors, the friends, and seen in their faces this new perspective. And then she should have said her line. A little different tone maybe. She should have said, Toto, my friend, we are not in Kansas anymore. That moment of clarity, to me, that's square one. Thanks for listening.